welcome to the Green Voice podcast. My name is Grant Ervin with S&B USA, coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University in downtown Pittsburgh. And today I have with me Nathan St.Germain from Studio St.Germain. Nathan, how's it going today?
Going well. Thank you for having me.
Going well. It's great. I love when we have repeat offenders, guests come back and they're up for a deeper and longer conversation. So thanks for coming back to us here at the Green Voice.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We talked a lot last time, and maybe just to cue this up for listeners, maybe give a little bit of background for folks on yourself and Studio St.Germain, occupying the architecture space.
Sure.
So I hope that we're going to get into a little bit of conversation around design and design in Pittsburgh, and maybe kind of broader here. But just for listeners, new and old, maybe just a quick little intro about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm an architect and I own Studio St.Germain. We are based out of Swickley, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And we specialize in high performance building and sustainability. And, part of what I had founded the firm on was this philosophy around building to give back. And what that means is our commitment to architecture as an art and to architecture as a public good. And the public good piece is really where the specialization in sustainability and high performance building kind of really dovetails nicely into that.
Okay, awesome. How long have you been in Pittsburgh?
I have been in Pittsburgh since 2012, and I started the firm in 2014.
In 2014. Okay. What's that? And before that, you were in New York City, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Just curious about, the approach. We'll call this the design episode. Like, a couple of things I'm curious about. One is, just your sense of design in Pittsburgh. I mean, there's a deep architectural heritage here in Pittsburgh, in terms of notable designers. CMU has a design school, an architectural school, histories in engineering, and you look at some of our historic structures, but also a lot of our new structures are at the cutting edge.
Right.
And Pittsburgh's a unique place like that, in that I think you have these periods in American history that are well represented. Talk to us a little bit about the design community and what that is like. I mean, there's organizations like AIA Pittsburgh, and
Right.
It's a collaborative industry, right?
Right. Yes.
And so I have a lot of friends. I was just with my friend Matt over the weekend, he's also an architect. And everyone everyone knows everyone in Pittsburgh, right? There's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but like the architectural community here is a tight one. There's when I told somebody that I was like, hey, I was talking to Nathan today on a podcast, like they're gonna know who you are and what you do. But talk about that community, community ethos in design, I think, here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think that, to your point earlier, it does have a rich history. And when I had come here in 2012, it was at a time in which I felt like the city as a whole was looking to kind of move forward from its industrial past in terms of its kind of image and messaging and what it's known for. And
like there was an inflection point at that period in time, you think?
I mean, I don't know if that was just something I was observing at the time, but it felt to me that it was trying to move in a direction of sustainability and innovation and being known more for that, looking forward, but also still kind of honoring its past, but wanting to look more into the future and what can the city become. And I think that from the design community perspective, what's nice about the city is we do have the university base here, which I think does drive a lot of some of that innovation. A lot of that starts there, and especially with the with the projects that are coming out from, from that sector, they often will have as part of their um, goals and objectives, sustainability and high performance building requirements.
Yeah.
So it's already kind of built into the request for proposal and things like that. And I think,
Where the universities themselves as the infrastructure or building owners are leading with that.
right,
Yeah.
right. And that also helps to kind of bring a little bit of advocacy and awareness to the private sector too,
Mm.
which is good. And I think from a design community, there are a lot of organizations here locally, like you had mentioned prior. The American Institute of Architects has the Pittsburgh chapter
Mm.
essentially, and then we also do have the state chapter, which is AIA Pennsylvania. And then there's the Green Building Alliance as
Mhm.
well. And there's a lot of there's Passive House, Pennsylvania has a chapter here. So there's a lot of resources out there for the design community to participate.
Mhm.
And, I do think that there the city itself and the community itself has done a really good job since I've been here in the education and the advocacy
Mm.
piece. But I think where um, we need to, as the community needs to really push the envelope is in the implementation.
Mm. In terms of the not just the design, but then the construction or the expansion of that, so it goes beyond, you mentioned, like, the universities or the public owners putting it into RFPs, and then I'd be remiss if you didn't say, because I just walked past a bit, like, owners like PNC Bank, for
Mhm.
example, that, like, literally and figuratively, like, push the envelope in terms of design and performance.
Right. And I think it's the responsibility of the design professionals to really make sure that when that becomes an owner project requirement, that how can that go from a goal and objective
Mhm.
into it really being, implemented and not just looking at it through the lens of this is a particular certification that has some cachet
Right. Like
for
a LEED
right.
certification or something like that.
Exactly. And really seeing not only is this the right one for us to be going after and why, but also what else is out there and should we be implementing some of these other strategies? And if so, what are we also doing post occupancy
Uh. So, like, understanding, like, how the building is being used, for example.
and performing
Yeah.
too, right?
So
Where
you're
it's
you're checking up. There's, like, a
right,
diagnostic post-delivery that's happening.
right, exactly. It's like, no different than when you or I would go to the doctor and we get a diagnostic of, okay, well, how are things going? And then you have to go and get tested. And then
Mhm.
you kind of come back in a plan and, you have to kind of monitor it over time
Right.
and make sure that, based on what it is that you're doing, whether it be, modifying your diet or things like that, that what you're doing is working. And I think it comes from a place where, and a philosophy we have at the firm, which is, you can't improve what you don't measure.
Mm.
So I think, you can measure all this stuff during the design and even, a bit through the construction, but it's really the occupancy when the people whom are using the building in which we have designed for
Yeah.
how is that all, working? And are they getting what
What they paid for.
right?
Yeah.
And how, you have a baseline and you have predictive measurements on performance, and then okay, well, after it's constructed, how is it performing
What is that?
inside?
Both from, like, the community perspective, but also, as you're engaging with a client, what is that, both the responsibility of the designer, like,
Hmm.
at like, how early is, like, being early in the process is important.
Oh yeah, absolutely
Right?
right.
And
Hmm.
but, like, how early and, like, how much of that is you as an individual designer and how much of that is the community that
Hmm.
can influence and push a building owner or an infrastructure owner into that high performance conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have
Push
to
might not be the right word.
right.
Lead, guile, facilitate.
Exactly. And I think that there is the performance as it relates to things that are known,
Mm,
right? Like there's certain aspirational pieces,
yeah.
right, to it. But then there's also knowns in terms of, okay, well, a reduction in, carbon emissions and lower energy and utility costs. But also, well, how is that affecting the occupant in a, health and wellness
Mm.
standpoint, performance productivity. And
It's not just the building itself, but the people inside the building, right?
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's ultimately who we're designing for. And I think that the other, oftentimes the piece at the beginning that really needs to be understood too is around the economics.
Uh-huh.
And I think the economic model is really important too, because that economic model will
We're talking
also,
about, like, the pro forma of a building or
well, I think it's when I say the economics, I mean around the costs of the higher performance
yeah.
things that you're trying to implement, and how is that from an economic model going to benefit the organization or the university over the long term from a return on investment strategy, or whether they're if they're borrowing money.
So the financial stack and how that factors in.
Exactly, because I think that ultimately what ends up happening is you want to be able to, when you're making decisions on performance, you really want to understand how that impacts the financial model.
Mm.
And
'Cause it
really,
always comes down to dollars and cents, right?
right. And I think that that's probably the one piece that in the sustainability and the high performance building and design world isn't spoken about enough,
Hmm.
right? Where it's like,
The
okay,
financial implications of it.
right. And even these larger organizations that have sustainability initiatives, and they're talking about their people,
Mhm.
right? And why they're doing it for the organization, for the people, whether they own the building or not, or they're doing a project, a new facility, and things of that nature. Well, how are those more the intangibles, like the performance and productivity, which really has an impact on the overall
Yeah.
model? Um, how is that being tracked? Like, how is that being evaluated? Right.
Like, did you make the right decision? Or not just that you made the right decision, but, like, how do you make those going back to your medical analogy, like, how do you make those tweaks going through the process, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then evaluating it over time.
Right.
Right.
No, as a designer, like, when you're take a building, like, you're there early, you're getting engaged,
Mhm.
you're working through the design of the process. What is your process or the desired process post-construction?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. What we do post construction is when we have at the firm what we call a high performance program.
Yeah.
And that's where we're kind of going through the discovery process all the way to the performance plan based on what they're looking for and what
Mhm.
can be done and what we recommend. And then that plan then gets decided upon and implemented. And once that plan is implemented and construction begins, and then after construction, what we have to do is we have to say, okay, well, based on what our performance criteria was in the design and the energy model and all of um, the stats and the figures that we were estimating, because it's predictive,
Sure.
right? Then once it's done construction, there's a number of different like tests that can be done, like building performance tests. So
Mm,
you want to do those tests, and then those tests will be able to give you the information that is um, that you can then compare to what is the predictive model. So now
okay.
you have an actual
Data set to work with.
right in a comparison. So, and then typically there can be other metrics where you'll have to, like, let's say, wait a year, like a energy use intensity is a yearly calculation.
Okay.
So you can have predictive consumption, right?
Mm.
And then after year one, we go back,
You got some utility bills to work with
and
and
then you take that information, you put it back in the model, and you can start to see and say, okay, well, um, we the predictive model said this,
Mhm.
and are we performing as designed? Are we underperforming? Are we overperforming?
Yeah.
And, how are we doing? And if let's say we're underperforming as an example, well, what, based on the testing after construction, are the things there that could be improved, even though it's done construction?
Mm.
The construction's been completed.
What's an example of that?
An example for something like that, albeit can be, maybe a little bit difficult at times, is, when you do, like, a lot of times we'll do thermal imaging
Sure.
and,
Your
air,
infrared
right,
kind of pictures. Yeah.
exactly, air tightness tests and things. And sometimes what you can do is you can find areas that, albeit it was in the design or construction documents, maybe there's an area of insulation, or that there's air kind of getting out
Ah, so
of one area where then you can actually access, and you can help, seal that up. And
maybe a little caulking here, a little insulation there type of deal.
yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
oftentimes, like, when it's done, during the construction process, you also want to do testing.
Uh-huh.
Right, so
To
you
make
don't
sure you're
wanna
on the right
wait, and
path.
right, you don't wanna wait until the very end, and then all of a sudden everything's completed, and then you have to kinda peel back layers. That's what you want to
Mm.
avoid. So, it's a process of also doing testing throughout construction, so you can evaluate, "Okay, well, this is per, design," because that's the time is really when you want to,
Be able to make an
address
adjustment.
it. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
What's the a lot of this stuff we're talking about. One of the things I wanted to ask you is that we were talking about the enlightened community here of architects and universities and things,
Mhm.
but there's also like the need to have a bigger public discussion around design, right?
That's right, yeah.
And the utility of it, and the utility of not just architecture but good architecture,
Mhm,
and good public, I'll call it like public realm investments, whether that's like parks or
mhm.
open spaces or even like streets and right of ways, I think kind of,
Sure.
and bridges all kind of fall into this. Like, what are the things, particularly in the media? You'll see projects that are either proposed,
Mhm,
proposed to happen.
mhm.
I'll give her an example. I shouldn't give an example, but I am. Like, I just saw in the news yesterday that Churchill Borough, out on the Parkway East, is
Mhm.
looking to renovate the old Westinghouse R&D site.
Okay.
And I think it's an illustrative one where you had a couple years ago, it was an Amazon warehouse was proposed and distribution center, and folks weren't so happy about this. And then in the paper yesterday was about mixed use development that was going to go
Mhm.
in. So retail housing, I think there was some grocery, those sorts of things.
Right.
At what point does the architecture and the design community come in and say, like, let's have a conversation about this, right? Like, to fulfill or to broaden the imagination of people and
Mhm.
fill in the blanks of some stuff. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
No, that's a really good question. I think that, one area that I th I've observed could use maybe a little bit of improvement in terms of the voice of the design community, would be in the press and the media in general,
Mhm.
right? When we're talking about projects about the city, and things that are intending to happen,
Mhm.
right, that are going to be, public facing,
Sure.
right, and which has a real pedestrian type element to it as well. Oftentimes, the the media is not reaching out to the design community
Okay.
to have an opinion, right? Say,
The Center for Media Innovation and Green Voices. So just let's put that out there.
yes. Um, but I think that that would be, a starting point,
Huh.
right? Where you're getting the viewpoint from the city and the city officials,
Sure.
right? You could be getting the viewpoint from, the real estate industry,
Mhm.
developers and real estate companies. But then you could also have the perspective from the design community,
Mm.
right? Like from the local architecture firms. And I think what that would help to do is that's how the public interfaces with that information.
Yeah.
So around the education and awareness of the role of the design community, the importance of the design community, how the design community is one in which those projects end up actually getting to.
Mm.
So a lot of the decisions that are being made,
Could be
and
too late in the current posture, you're
I,
saying?
I wouldn't say it's too late. It's just that it's missing an opportunity to have that community involved earlier to help
Mm.
influence the decisions
Mhm.
that are being made in the crafting of the, request for proposal or what have you.
So that we're asking for some of the right things.
Right. It's the
Yeah.
ideation,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And I think that that's really where the design community is trained really well.
Like, are we asking for the right things?
Right. And are we looking at it, from that perspective and that
Mhm.
in that lens?
It's interesting because, like, a lot of times, just I'm not that I'm playing the devil's advocate to that, but, like,
Mhm.
a lot of times what the general sentiment is it'll slow the process down, right?
Mhm.
But I think ultimately, like, oftentimes what you get is a better product at the end of the day.
Right.
Is that
And I think it's a little bit of a reflection of our time in terms of, speed is the structuring value of the 21st century,
right?
right? So,
For better or worse.
yeah. And I think that those discussions are going to be, and ideas are going to be had anyway,
Mm.
right? Or there's a board that
Yeah.
is involved, and the people that are on that board,
Who are in charge of stewardship
right?
of the asset or the building or yeah.
Right, or in responsible, or have been given responsibility to figure things out.
Mm.
I think that's where, if the design community can be, um, more involved, where maybe somebody on the board is one of the, principals or, leadership positions of the local design community, or people in the media will have some go-tos and say, okay, well, this is what's planning to happen. What does the design community think?
Interesting. Like, what's your take, or
Exactly.
what are some things that should be being considered here, or are they prepared? And which, just going back to the article I just read, I thought it was reflective and responsible of the local officials in this case to like look at things like zoning
Right.
and
Hmm.
like are we preparing ourselves? And I have a question here with this. Like, are we preparing ourselves for this? In terms of code and
Hmm.
giving the right types of like structural guidance in order to create the end product. Like, how important is that? And Pittsburgh's having this conversation right now too about like permit reform.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Hmm.
um, and I was just a part of a focus group last week, led by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce around
Hmm.
permit reform.
Right.
And I think there's like uniformity across the board that the system needs modern system, and I use that in a ubiquitous sense,
Right.
right? There's
Right.
multiple systems, but like that there needs to be a modernization of that approach. What's your take there? Like,
Yeah. I think that regulatory review is an important step that needs to happen, and it's there for a reason. And I think,
yeah, it's like you need regs, right? Like you need the guidance.
yeah, and you need a process.
Yeah.
And that process for, the onus never wants to be on the applicant,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, well, figure this out. If things aren't clear, in terms of the steps of that process or the timing around that process, and depending on who, in the sequencing of the process, who's seeing something first, how long is it going to take? Because on our end, in the design community, it's hard. It can be challenging to communicate that back to a client when
Mhm.
there's, well, why is
Why does it
something
take
taking
60
so
days?
long,
Or
or now the process, but I think to your point of where are the areas in that can be improved?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to things like zoning and that type of process, again, the design community is involved in that
Mm-hmm.
all the time, right?
They know it intimately.
Right.
Yeah.
So kind of going to that well as a resource to say, okay, if they're going to put if they're working on the reform,
Mm-hmm.
um, then having the design community be a part of that, um, maybe not so much in a public realm per se, right? But at least kind of strategically go out and say, okay, well, this is stuff. Who are the experts in this,
Right.
right? And let's start bringing those people in to help do this. Because what's interesting is like when you start going outside of the city center, and this is common all throughout the United States, not just Western Pennsylvania, is that like post World War II, when there was a lot of housing
Mm-hmm.
being built, right? Because people were moving out of the city into like suburbs.
Sure.
That's how that whole suburban sprawl happened and whatnot. Was that these small communities that were being, um, uh, created, if you will, or had been created, but there wasn't a lot of development happening. It was mainly like agricultural stuff like
Right.
that. Is they would go to like law firms would draft template ordinances,
Sure.
right? And those template ordinances would be adopted by this specific,
By
borough or
Yeah.
municipality or what have you, but they weren't written specifically for that
place.
area.
Mm.
Okay. So I think that there
Is that what leads to a lot of like homogeneity that you see across the landscape?
that, but also more so like, if you're in an area that is more walkable and, pedestrian friendly,
Oh,
and that may have also, a retail and kind of a smaller commercial corridor. Do what do the parking requirements look like? And do you want to bring all the cars right into the center?
sure.
Right. And and what the city is and what that is a completely different animal. But what is within the ordinance and the process and the regulatory review that may be antiquated and not current to what is how the city's developing? How can that then be improved? Because we all want to see progress and development, and you don't want to obviously deter that
Yeah.
because of a process that is going to cost time and money with delays and uncertainty.
Here, I really ask a personal question here.
Okay.
So that you just led into one of my deep thoughts. So the idea of the pedestrian street, the
Mhm.
pedestrian retail street.
Mhm.
So we were just in Dublin.
Yes. Mhm.
And so Dublin has multiple, but the one I'll highlight is Grafton Street.
Okay.
Or I've been in Glasgow. Glasgow, Scotland has Buchanan Street. There's a couple others there too. The Los Ramblas in Barcelona.
Mhm.
They're such a great experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, crazy question.
Yeah.
What would it take to make a pedestrian street in America? Or Pittsburgh, to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Or Swickley. Anyway, I just think it's amazing to me the enjoyment and watching people and the enjoyment that they have through that experience,
Right.
right? And it's the scale of building. It's at a quote unquote whatever this means. You probably have a definition, a human scale.
Sure, right.
But there's always retail and mixed retail, like
Mhm.
high end, middle end, low end. There's something for everybody.
Right.
Same thing with restaurants and pubs and bars.
Right, food and beverage
Eh, eh,
options, yeah.
and it's just I'm amazed at how like people just do it to walk.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily they go to shop. There's just a mixture, street
Sure.
performers, everything.
Mhm.
What would that is that illegal in America?
No, no. I mean, I think what as an example, if we take the city of Pittsburgh, right? There's been talk about Smithfield Street
That'd be a great example.
as an example,
Yeah.
right? Like what, identifying the areas that,
Something core,
right,
right?
that will help improve and beautify the thoroughfare, if you will,
Uh-huh.
right? But the thoroughfare is not for primarily you eliminate it as a mass transit
Mhm.
option unless, of course, it's underground,
Sure.
and you can kind of come up to it.
Right.
But in terms of on the surface, the vehicle kind of coming into the equation starts to affect that pedestrian experience where, again, Smithfield Street, you could, I, we've never analyzed it
Mhm.
through that lens, but that would be, there has been talk about
That
that. I've seen, maybe not making it fully pedestrian, but is there an area within the city in the core
that could serve that
that
purpose.
could serve that purpose that already has most of the infrastructure there? And what I mean by that, the buildings already exist. You don't have to build them,
Yeah.
right? But it would help with the retail component.
Mhm.
It would help with
Yeah,
the
parking adjacent.
residential,
Yep.
you know, uh, component. Now, there can be some challenges when you're dealing with things like parking. Parking can be, if people are living, they want to be, but again, that's a that there's other avenues and ways and things like that
Uh-huh.
becomes, secondary and tertiary ways of getting to those buildings that already exist.
You just need to
Okay.
have rear access.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and you've got to look at that. You got to look at it and kind of, again, diagnose, right?
Uh-huh.
Hey, is this a good candidate, and what could be done, and how could something like a public-private partnership help, get that.
Like a business improvement district or
Yeah, and
yeah,
right,
to
or just
manage
to
the space.
right, or entice that, developers in the real estate industry to want to, uh, you know, renovate and, take something that may be, from an occupancy standpoint, not, uh, not very active, and
Mhm.
how do you reactivate it? Well, it's really about reactivation.
Yeah, I think that's what's, like, a fascinating piece about that is that you, obviously, you would have you need to have deep conversations about this and logistics and how it works, but it just seems to me that there's such a value creation opportunity also, both in terms of, like, the public value, like the experience,
Sure.
but also the real estate value, right? In
Oh,
terms
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
terms of what that could yield in terms of being a destination,
Mhm.
um, in terms of its desirability,
Sure.
of being there. 'Cause that's
Livability.
livability,
Mhm.
because that's the other thing that I was observing is that, like, it's, usually, like, there's always a mixture of uses, but it's also, like, the prime destination, right? Like,
Right, it
there's
becomes the center.
the heartbeat
Right.
almost,
Mhm.
and it's the place where you go.
Mhm.
I don't wanna I can talk about that all day, but one of the things I was interesting too in your practice,
Yeah.
you have the idea section,
Yes.
and so you as part of your work, you're pushing kinda that type of dialogue
Right.
in your practice. What was the generation or germination of that?
Yeah.
And tell me about that type of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the genesis for the ideas came from, um, a place that was about,
This is
look.
a section on your website. We should kinda lead into that a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and what we do, and again, the genesis came from th the notion about what is going out there, and what's happening in our region,
Mhm.
also outside of our region, that is, under the umbrella of, you know, uh, design,
Mhm.
sustainability, building performance, things at like a scale of a city scale,
Yeah.
and start to come up with ideas for um what do we want to talk about and why do we want to talk about it? And it doesn't always have to come from us. Like it's our work. Like
Mhm.
we want to pay attention to what else is going on and look at
So it's like what's on your radar?
yeah,
Yeah.
in precedence in a way in which it's a way for myself and staff to kind of take a little bit of a break from what we're looking at on a particular project.
Mhm.
Or maybe an idea comes from something it is that we're working on, and do a little bit of research and development. Say, okay, well, how can we communicate this in a way where the audience in whom we're communicating to, for the most part, is the general public,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to be careful with like when we don't get too technical,
Yeah.
um, and and things like that. Some get a little bit more technical than others,
Mhm.
but we like to do it because it forces us to to look outside of what it is that we're doing currently,
Mm.
and saying like, okay, well, what's happening out there, and how can we maybe start to think or implement what um, these precedents are doing and saying, and how can that apply to not only our work but also um, at like our own community scale, like
Yeah.
in and around Swickley, at at the city
Mhm.
and regional level, like for the the region that that we are currently in,
Mhm.
and that's really I think why why we do it, and what comes from that internally for us is we find that we learn and we find things and examples and interesting precedents that we try and find ways. Okay, now we've talked about it. Well,
Mhm.
how can we possibly implement it, or
Ah.
maybe not just talk about something, but hey, is there, how can we provide a solution, or is there a solution in our particular region, or should our region be thinking about this as well?
What starts the search process? Like, I was interested,
Yeah.
like, when I was looking on there, and I wanna talk about one of them specifically, but,
Mhm.
you're talking about everything from, energy to mass timber,
Yeah, right.
like,
Mhm.
there's a whole host of things that you guys are exploring, like,
Yeah.
is there, like, a waste paper basket, like, in the center of the office, and, you're just tossing ideas into the basket, and you pull one out, and you're like, "Alright, we're gonna talk about mass timber here." So, yeah, whatever the case may be, like, what's that ideation process?
Yeah, it's very organic,
Okay.
right? There's not a specific like time frame or
Yeah.
quantity or schedule that we have for it. It's more where we do talk about it, where, after we've completed one, we'll say, okay, or as we're working through them, like in certain times, like beginning of the year and
Mm.
things, we'll say, okay, how many did we do last year? Should probably have, did that feel like the right amount? Could we give a little bit more
Mhm.
or less, or what have you? And then like periodically it'd be like, okay, we'll start thinking about, well, what's out there now, or what have we been kind of thinking about, what's excited us, what's been bothering us,
Mhm.
and then like collectively internally we'll start to kind of jot things down and
Okay.
say, okay, well, mass timber as an example came up, and among other things, and we
Maybe explain to folks what that is a little bit.
yeah, mass timber is a it's a system now, and
We could guess, but, like
essentially what it is in its kind of basic level is the structural system of the building is made from timber,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of advantages to that in terms of the the overall kind of building performance,
Mhm.
where
Carbon.
yeah, right, there's it's the manufacture of the material is less carbon intensive than other materials and things. So but the process that we go through, and then once we pick something that we think we want to explore, that's where we go into the R&D.
Okay.
And then we'll go out and we'll work, and we'll figure out, like, okay, what are we finding, right? And then based on what we find, what is the angle?
Okay. Like, how can you approach it?
What is the story we're trying to tell?
Yeah, how does Studio St.Germain kinda
Yeah,
factor into this?
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's our opinion or our perspective? And then if it kind of passes the R&D test, and we feel like we have something to say,
Mhm.
then we go into the writing
Yep.
piece of it, and then that goes through its own iterations.
Okay.
And then from there, how we kind of distill that idea is we kind of distribute it through through our email campaign
Okay.
that's internal to, like, our website, and how that all works. And then that way it goes to, like, it goes out to people who are who have either subscribed or are part of our network, so that we're sending it out. And sometimes we'll also send it to, like, the media. I
Okay.
think it's something that
Yeah, like something juicy. Yeah.
something they should know about, or it should go, we really feel it's important, and we want to not just go into our own internal network. We want to
Push it out.
push it out.
One of the things, just to turn the corner here, coming up on time, I wanted to make sure we hit a couple of things. One is, uh, when I was reviewing that, the topic of passive house is another kind of big thing, and you guys had a super interesting project. I think it was in Wilkinsburg.
Yeah,
Is
right.
that right?
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me about passive house, and because that was like, it went from on the idea board, and then you see it like in your project profiles, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so that's a really good example of going from the ideation and
Yeah.
R&D phase to putting it to application, but
Yeah.
also putting it to application at what I would call a unique scale.
Yeah.
That is for the everyday consumer, if you will. It's not a major commercial office building or
Yeah.
a tower. We talked early in the conversation about universities. Like, this is
Yeah, I think people can relate to that project in a way, because it's a home,
yeah,
right? It's where, we all have, whether it be an apartment, a home,
yeah,
what have
your
you, a
domicile.
condo.
Yeah,
Everyone has that, and oftentimes it's an important place
yeah,
for most people. It's the center. Uh, so yeah, with passive house specifically, it's a building performance standard
uh-huh,
that, it's not prescriptive, and it was based out of, or founded in, Germany.
okay.
And it was a
Haas,
Haus, meaning building, right?
Haus,
Yes,
if my
house.
Pittsburgh accent isn't coming through, right?
But when it got translated over here in the States, they translated to house versus building. So I think that causes a little bit of confusion.
Unless you're from Morningside, where I'm from, where we have Eddie's Pizza Haas, which I don't know the full story. It's good pizza, but, like, it's Haus.
Yeah.
And it's not Passive House certified, but maybe they should look into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, go ahead.
But anyway, it's a building performance certification that's pretty stringent,
Uh-huh.
right? And if they have for new building, and they have for existing buildings,
Yep.
right? So there's essentially a retrofit standard and a new construction standard. And if someone is inclined to pursue that, like any other type of standard, there's certain requirements that you have to hit, and there's essentially a design phase. And then if you get through the design phase and it gets certified, you kind of continue on.
Okay.
And
When you're seeking the certification.
yes, when you're
Yeah.
seeking the certification, and sometimes, like, in particular, like an existing building, if the model and the information that's coming back, you're not able to get, to get to the certification, or depending on how far away you are from it and how you could,
Mhm.
achieve it, you can stop there, or you can continue to pursue, especially if you are getting, it is pre-certified. Now it's just, okay, that's in drawings and design and energy model. Now it has to go to the build, and we have to make sure that during that
We're
really
following what the
important
design
stage.
was.
Yeah,
Keep the standard.
exactly. And then there's tests at the end, like building performance tests at the end that, and project documentation that you have to submit.
Right.
And that also has to follow what the requirement is. So in order to get your, like, what they call final certification.
Interesting. So it's no easy process.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's something that, it certainly takes time and an attention to detail. And, when it is one in which, can't achieve that, or the things are looking good, you just have to, make sure along the way that you're updating things and you're doing the things that you need to do to make sure that you're following that way. In the end, there's not a whole lot of surprises.
Right.
Yeah. And
Going back to what we were saying earlier, like the measurement, the verification.
right.
So it is an exemplary process in terms of what you're following.
You're right.
One final question for you, Nathan. Going back to the idea section.
Yeah.
What's on the ideas board for 2026? And can you give us a sneak peek about some of the things that Studio St.Germain is thinking about?
Yeah. One of the things we're actually working on now, and it should be coming out pretty soon, is something that I mentioned before around, like, the economics of high performance building, right? And kind of looking at it through that lens, and not just through the lens of either the performance or what that level of performance and the advantages thereof for, like, energy use, and also for the occupant in terms of thermal comfort, and a lot of the things that are known now, right? Those have been evaluated and understood
For over decades now, right?
Yeah, it's known, and especially to the people who are doing the work,
Yeah.
right? And and I think the question that comes up the most is when clients come to us, they want to know. The big question is, they may know about the standard or are interested in and understand the benefits and the value thereof, but they want to know, well, is my project a candidate for this? Or does it make sense for us to pursue this particular certification versus a different one?
But everybody's looking for a higher standard, though, in that case.
Yeah, I think they're trying to understand what they can do, because they know that they're oftentimes environmentally conscious, and they want to do something to, improve the indoor environmental quality of the space that they reside in. They want to hedge against the rising utility costs and kind of future-proof things. And what is it can they do, and what are the things based on their particular level of investment, or, how much construction do they really want to take on?
Right.
What is the best, there's lots of things we can do, but what is the right thing to do
for their project?
Yes, for their specific project, their specific situation.
That's awesome. Nathan St.Germain from Studio St.Germain, thank you for joining us here on The Green Voice. And
Thank you, Grant.
Thanks for elevating the conversation about design here in the Pittsburgh region.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you all for listening in to The Green Voice. I'm Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Thanks to the folks here at the Center for Media Innovation, the team at Pittsburgh Earth Day. And once again, thanks to Nathan for joining us, and thank you for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Be well.